Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to welcome you here to another session of our research lab. We are the Liebling House, a center for contemporary urbanism, for architecture, for conservation. We are at Ederson 29, and soon we are going to open our gates again for a wonderful new exhibition called Welcome to the Republic. And this is actually the topics that we're going to talk about today. The Liebling House is an extension or prolonged arm of the Tel Aviv municipality, the engineering department, the conservation department of the city, and the German government in form of the interior ministry. As I mentioned, this session today, I'm very happy to welcome a local expert and an international expert on the field of public space. As we all know, public space today is constantly changing in front of our eyes. Of course, our exhibition is going to deal with what is going on today because of the pandemic situation and what is going to happen to the public space surrounding us from now on. But we also want to address topics of how we can adapt empty spaces and vacant spaces in order to revive the public space that we somehow a little bit forgot about before this whole pandemic situation happened. This is why we call our exhibition Welcome to the Republic, because we want to civically engage again in the public space. So in our house, the Liebling House, we have what we call the fifth facade, a wonderful roof on a modernistic building, flat roof overlooking the whole city. You see with 360 degrees, a horizon of high rises already in front of our eyes and a lot of vacant empty spaces in between. So today, our experts are going to engage with their knowledge or their ideas of how we can adapt with this new opportunities of this fifth space. Today, I am very pleased to welcome our first guest, Jacob Szczęsny. I hope I said it right, but Kuba is what we refer him to. So please, Jacob, if I said your name wrong, you correct me. His works are on the verge of disciplines, designing brands, art directing, programming, and designing public spaces, and even art installations. His project, The Carrot House, was introduced in the permanent collection of the MoMA, where it still is in New York. So this is a great project that Kuba has done among a lot of other interesting projects, which he's going to show us a little bit more about today. And our local guest, I'm very pleased to welcome you, Yael, Professor Yael Moriah, Dean of Design Department at Shenkar College, a landscape architect. We know many of her projects in Israel and in Tel Aviv, just now finished or already a year ago, the Dizengoff Square, which really made a tremendous change in the heart of the city. And what is also very interesting, she designed or she created a landscape biennale at Bat Yam, which refers to what we're going to talk about today. So Jacob, you are going to start with your presentation, and Yael, you will be somewhat of a commenter for Jacob. I hope you will provoke him as much as you can. And I'm welcoming Shira Levi-Binyamini, director of the Liebling House as well, to also, if she wants, raise a hand. And please, Jacob, we'll meet after your presentation here again.
First of all, hello. I'm very happy to be here in this digital realm with you tonight. And I'm very happy Yael decided to join us and spend some time commenting and provoking. I hope it's going to be an interesting discussion, as we had an introduction to it yesterday in private. So I will share the screen now, and I hope it will be visible. If we have any tech problems, please tell me. I'm getting there.
Jacob, just go on presentation mode. Great.
Voila. So it's visible.
Yes.
So to start with, we were thinking about the title. So Roofs to the People is, of course, a funny leftist reference. But altogether, I would like to underline also that the discussion that we started around the subject of republic, so reassessing, giving back, or bringing back to life different spaces in order to make them become truly public spaces, truly given to people in one way or another, is a discussion that has to take place outside of political logic understood as particularly interest. It has to be something of a common goal for everyone. This is how I feel we should start concentrating on certain new status quo that we would negotiate and get to a consensus together, whatever the sympathies. I'll start with something that is not a roof. It's just the opposite. It's a project that I have had the pleasure to design and build with Ofer Bilik, who was then the ex-member of a group Efodana. It happened within the biennial of landscape architecture that here present Yael was curating in Bat Yam. That was a very interesting event for me when it comes to scale, because at the very same time, the street art festival was happening there. So we had an amassment of people suddenly arriving to what Bat Yam is, as we know it. So a sort of a satellite city. In European scale, it would be probably rather a suburb of a big city, the big center that Tel Aviv is, where suddenly I saw, as a tourist or person visiting, many places that the curatorial effort and the effort of artists brought back to life, even if this was just for some time, even if this was just a way of showing certain potentials. And this is when, for the first time in a more serious way, we started considering, both as artists, as architects, but also as curators. Later on, I have become a curator in different venues myself. Considering time and administrative procedures as crucial elements for designing future uses and laws behind, let's say, communal uses that we can share in the future, even if the things that we are working on are, again, I underline, ephemeral. Tamagotchi Park, that was inspired by Tamagotchi game or toy that probably some of us remember as a around year 2000, a sort of a Japanese toy with an unnatural electronic beam that had to be fed by the owner in order to survive. So this was the year or a year before that Tel Aviv started a ban on using communal water for watering private gardens. So our will with Ofer was to actually show to Tel Avivians that there is a big source of water nearby, and it's called the Mediterranean. And this very source of water can be used for common goals of different type, but it requires common action, the action from the people, not just waiting for something to happen. So what happened was that we have developed a very simple tool with a seesaw, so something that was inviting people to actually play with. Um, mm, Under the seesaw, we have placed a simple pump that was pumping the water from the sand, so from the wet mixture of water and sand that you can place digging under the beach. And this water, by the fact of moving the seesaw by playing people, was moving the water up to a nearby, you can see this white object nearby a water tower that was later on distributing the water again with the pressure produced by constant use of the seesaw. So at least two people were necessary to make the process go on, distributing it to cones that you can see in the foreground of the photograph, surrounded by plantings done with so-called first line plants, seeds brought from Australia, who could survive in highly salinated sand, and that started flourish soon after. I don't know what is the situation today. I have no informations about the contemporary situation. Either it disappeared totally, or is in decay, or maybe it functions well. I don't know. I never had the chance to monitor it. But basically, our will at the time was to show to people from primary school level to adults that only with reestablishing certain new game, even if there is a pretext of a hedonistic nature, we will have the opportunity to change the situation. In this case, virtually changing the sand dunes into a living greenery covered landscape. You can see here young people, including me, that was 10 years younger at the time, playing on the seesaw. What was interesting was that for about a year, we've been developing a program in which primary school kids, with help of our volunteers, were instructed on how to use the installation before it was even erected. And therefore, they were instructed how actually the whole system of desalination works, and that the entire installation will require their involvement, but also will require them not to break it. So to, in a way, identify with it and have some respect towards it as something that provides a common good. The first roof-related project that appeared, and this is also probably why I was invited by Lieblinghaus to propose a new project for the fifth facade of Lieblinghaus, was a project that I have developed in 2016 in Casa do Povo in São Paulo. Also financed by Adam Mickiewicz Institute, an institution, Polish cultural promotion institution that is helping me with many projects. The institution of Casa do Povo is an interesting example of decaying modernist utopia that was run by Polish and Russian Jews living in Sao Paulo, all of them strongly leftist, but from different leftist fractions. So it was a sort of a negotiated utopia between different representatives of or sympathizers of leftist movements at the time, including Stalinists. So in 1953, they managed to raise a building that became a living, according to their will, a living monument of those who survived Holocaust, but also of those who perished in Holocaust. But instead of building something that would be just a mere sculpture, they made almost 15,000 square meters of interiors, living interiors with entire infrastructure, starting from a theater placed underground, going through multifunctional spaces for performative actions of different type, going through factory-alike spaces where people actually started their first businesses finishing with a primary school and a kindergarten placed on the rooftop. You can see here now in a photograph the empty space of the kindergarten that was not working since beginning of 80s. Below you can see Benjamin Seroussi, the director of the institution, and dancers and choreographers preparing for one of the many gigs happening in the institution that was revived by a group of 30-something-year-old people who overtook it from people in their 80s, 90s, who were already not leftist when it comes to everyday practice. Most of them became industrialists or in general capitalists, but they were, what is interesting, for the sake of sentimental reference to their own past, maintaining this symbol of their youth and ideals that they shared at the time. So Benjamin asked me to find an idea for revitalizing a space placed more or less on 5th floor in a building deprived of a working elevator, which is an everyday situation in most downtown buildings in Sao Paulo. So the task wasn't easy, but we decided to do something that would be provocative at the first same time and misleading. So I have proposed what you can see here, a sort of a fake bed linings, bed sheets drying in the air that were in fact polyester fabric moving water aside. It was at the time, it was a moment of heavy rains, but it was all covering a space that was my salon, that was my living room, the living room of a Polish refugee, because the Polish refugees, or mostly Polish refugees, Yiddish speaking, have built this building, this idea, this dream. And using cheap furniture from a pawn shop, I have managed to create a space in which I was greeting people coming to visit a Polish architect. So I was playing a role of a real architect from Poland every day. And every night we had different happenings or concerts or sponsored dinners, presentations, projections, discussions happening. So this is the real Polish architect sleeping on his sofa. So I was also playing a role, a performative role of myself. And for 5 weeks, the roof was bombed with activities. The program was very dense, and it was happening day by day. It was all announced in media and in social media. So soon we have developed a sort of a visibility with this project, also leading to the use of the space as an artistic residency. Just after Yael Bartana did her neon there. Now it's being used for very different purposes, even if the canopy is not there anymore. It was demounted 2 months later. Gustav Zieliński Square takes a lot from our and my experience with Tamaguchi project in Bat Yam. First of all, because we were in a slightly similar situation, dealing with, in this case, with a dream of Nursultan Nazarbayev, the ex-first secretary of Communist Party of Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan, who became the first and very long ruling president of the country, who decided some 22 years ago to build his dream city, a bit like Fez in or Brasilia. So this was sort of a projection. The city grew out from a 19th century nucleus and a communist part built mostly in 70s, full of so-called Khrushchevkas. So low standard prefab buildings for working class. What was interesting was that in this part, the old part of the city, you had mostly workers building the new middle class and upper middle class part called Astana on the other side of the river, living in conditions that were maybe not deplorable, but far away from what was the dream built on the other side of the river. An interesting part of the story is that Tselinograd, the old part of Astana, is based on two overlapping urban grids, resulting in strange triangular spaces that are, especially for the city and planning office of Astana, now Nur Sultan, quite difficult to deal with, since these are triangles. So this part of the city has a number of triangular empty spaces adjacent to residential blocks. We decided to provide something that will have an effect of a vertical beacon, something to attract attention, but something that will in the first place be a frame for activity that is not fully described, that people will have to learn, they will have to hybridize, they will have to bring their own idea and hang these activities, these ideas and means to realize these to the very frame. So the triangular space was overtaken by us, which was interesting at the time was that it, even though we had a full green light from municipality of Astana and the planning office, even within the planning office, we had two very strong fractions fighting between each other when it comes to our idea of overtaking the perpendicular street that you can see here that was previously a parking. And so we kicked out the cars from there and linked with this space the triangular dark asphalt covered square with the residential blocks. So imagine this ongoing discussion about what liberty is. In Poland, it's also a vital thing, because after '89, after fall of communism, many people treat car as a main fetish of liberty, something that is strongly connected to American way of life that was projected to different Asian but also European countries, that is also a nightmare for especially downtowns of our cities. So the triangular in-plan installation had to be overtaken by people. I wanted the square to look informal, as opposed to highly formal representative spaces on the other side of the river. It was supposed to look like a workshop, an outdoor workshop for people to do things in it. So for 1 year, an NGO that we have invited from Almaty was proceeding with workshops with different age groups, starting with late kindergarten kids, finishing with seniors, on what can be done there, because and the reasons were quite simple. Most of the inhabitants of the buildings you see here never used planned urban public spaces. The public spaces they knew were mostly from the tradition of countryside in Kazakhstan, where people are mostly sitting together under the trees in the shadow, playing chess or listening to the radio. But there's not much of an experience when it comes to using a programmed public space. So after 1 year, on the opening day, we had an eruption of interest and feeling of fulfillment of something like in case of Bat Yam project was finally happening. So people could finally use it. This is the space after we kicked out the cars. And this is where the effects of workshops could finally be hanged. These were hammocks, these were seesaws, screens for screening, an exhibition of photographs, etc., etc. So, plus it was also done as usual, even though it's a permanent installation with a funny budget. In case of Zusedom community, an ongoing project that I am doing thanks to invitation from Neue Auftraggeber Foundation from Berlin. The situation is quite parallel, but different under many aspects. Zusedom is a village just half an hour, maybe 45 minutes from downtown Stettin or Szczecin, that was a German city before World War II and now is in Poland. But because of land prices varying from 6 to 8 euros, that are almost 3 times lower than the prices on the Polish side around the very city, in the suburbs of Szczecin, many Polish people are buying plots and houses in Germany, treating this, let's say, God-forgotten village as a potential for a new suburb for the Polish activities, while they are actually using the infrastructure and finally not only the roads or a post office, but also schools, because they are sending their kids to German schools. But they are not identifying with the German part. It's actually a sort of a colonization of space done in a paradoxical way because of the difference of prices and the fact that there are resources to get colonized, including the famous German highways. So a group of 20 activists, local activists, in a place that is that has a population of 200 people, so it's 10% of population, decided to ask Neue Auftraggeber to help them with changing the situation and creating a community center that would, in their ambition, attract the new users of the city. In fact, not real inhabitants, but users of the city, in order to do different things with them, with the original autochthonic population on site. And while the first idea was to build something out of containers with a bit of wood standing in the middle of a lawn nearby in front of an old GDR school, I have proposed to actually play a game with the past. One of the motifs that I'm very much interested in, and instead of demolishing the school, which was the plan of the community, I suggested to actually take out 3 levels from this very Plattenbau prefabricated building that you can see here, and to use the ground floor, the elements of the ground floor, as a sort of a shoebox for 2 main functions. One of them would be a water reservoir, a hidden pond with a floating garden of different greenery and flora species. And the other one would be the one of the community center placed inside of this, let's say, concrete box. These are the inhabitants and activists of the city, of the village, sorry. The photograph was taken inside of the school. And it was also interesting for many of them, because the moment I suggested, why don't we actually use the school? This is when we found the keys to the very school and decided to go into the building. So suddenly these people, with all the mixed feelings related to their German past, and especially GDR past, we have to remember that the 20th century has left 2 huge scars on Germanic heart, which was, of course, the Third Reich and the GDR. So suddenly they were revisiting a space that was not, provoking mixed feelings, but also sentiments, because within this school that was actually a school for future agricultors and household managing women, we found an entire collection of 19th century household and agricultural tools. So suddenly they sort of revisited certain assets from their complicated past, something that lots of us, including Poles coming from, let's remember it, a country strongly divided, not only today, but also yesterday by communism. Something that we are still very much afraid of even talking about. Because at any moment we start considering the past and trying to sum up what was happening, we end up in emotional conflicts. So the proposal is the one of just maintaining part of the ground floor internal prefabricated wall elements, dividing the space from the rest with a small 50 centimeter tall, the space with water on one side, and designing the space of the community center with a big common area with basic amenities, including a kitchen that is very important here, and a big roof that will get the water. What is interesting is that the roof will play a role of a canopy, but it is also covering an unheated space. So the idea is to have to use a space that is not really a building. It's not fully closable, it's not heated. It's something that has to be taken care of even much more physically on daily basis. So it will require the involvement of people, not only, I hope, of the 20 activists, in order to maintain it. So this is a section showing different geometries of the roof, the water collecting roof. And this is the effect we would like to get. So something deadly simple, basing on either glulam or plain planks and OSB. So really low level of complication and overall simplicity of the structure. So we can see here gutters moving water into the pond, and a large deck for different activities, and even keeping the ugly nature of old prefab elements as remnants, as something that is a witness of the past. This is the idealized interior, of course. This is a rendering. The project is ongoing. We are now fundraising for it. And what is interesting is that the program of it and the whole idea was developed again with representatives of the group during quite a long time, since March this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. What about Living House? Where are we here in the whole thing?
Very good question. So I will now go out from the presentation mode. Wait a second. Okay. Now about Liebling House. we have decided to develop a project that will have the property and possibility and the potential of something to be interpreted as a platform, something that will not only be the surface of the fifth facade of the rooftop, but also that will be a space for interpretation of the users, but also of artists that will, not only artists, that will participate in the programming and creation of rooftop activities. The idea is based pretty much on this frame paradigm, providing an opportunity for other people than just me to fulfill the frame with different activities. Some of them would be physical as objects fulfilling the spaces, the emptinesses in the structure provided by my design. Some of them will be providing a performative dimension that will also be necessary, I think, in this location. I hope we will be able to open it sooner or later. When would that actually happen? I hope it's in spring.
Yes. Well, I see from your work that usually you try to sort of find the spirit of the community and engage sort of bottom up the community with sort of conquering their own sense of public space. Could this be correct, or how
Yes,
would you?
Thing is important here, especially in Lieblinghaus case, is that we are dealing with something that is not obviously perceived as space for interaction outside of just the everyday use, either as a residential building's roof or as maybe occasionally a place for chit-chatting during openings for an art institution. So providing this space as a platform for different people to come and set or participate in setting the rules. Maybe part of these rules will be set by us, you as institution, but lots of it will be about epitomizing in a way or making a model of what is the interaction that is happening within constraints of law, culture, sociology, on everyday basis in what we know as stereotypal public spaces, starting with streets, with squares or parks, and finishing with spaces that are even more complicated, as we have discussed it yesterday with Yael, spaces that are hybrid public spaces with strong influence related to the fact that they might be administrated or owned by private sector. In this case, we are doing with a public municipal institution. So it's also not as obvious as being on a street or in a square.
So yeah, maybe you could reflect to maybe from your experience also doing so many public spaces in the city and in Israel, what are the sort of catalysts or what makes a place function? If you could, I don't know, describe some relevant issues that make spaces flourish in your eyes. You're on mute, so.
Sorry. If I can, I would like to take this opportunity of the beautiful presentation of Cuba. And although we were talking quite a lot yesterday, today hearing again the presentation, make me think more about what is a roof. Okay, and I think that maybe we have a little bit elaborate with this definition about a roof. As another kind of a public space. I will say, yesterday we were talking a lot about between the public and private. And in my eyes today, we have to, I think we have to look again about the combination or erasing even the border between the private and the public and looking at the space as a space. And therefore, it's very interesting the way you see the roof. And I think it's not only about, it's not only for people, it's more than that. Because I can see the roof, as you mentioned a minute ago, as a political space. As we see a square, as we see the street. And I would like a little bit hear about it from you, because I think we need to define better if we are, I don't know, taking the roof as a new space, okay, or this beautiful definition of republic, the roof. We have to understand better what are the possibility, what is the potential of it, and therefore I think that what you are suggesting now for labeling, it's very interesting because. It's again looking at it as I look at open spaces as an infrastructure of activities. It's an infrastructure for activities and permit the space to permit this activity. I think it's a great success, and it's therefore I'm thinking when I'm talking after it for design to be very simple, very abstract. So everyone can find himself into it and invent himself into the space. But I would like to hear from you a little bit more, because I know that you are thinking about the roof as
You mean from Sharon or from me?
or
from Shira?
From you.
From you.
Okay.
You are the creator here. You are the creator.
Okay.
You are the architect.
Imagine Africa, in the middle of Africa, yes? So where will you see the biggest wealth, the richest ecosystem or biotop in African conditions? It will be a river, especially the border of a river. This is where animals come to drink. Yes, so something that is a basic resource is provoking an activity that results in many things, including one animal devouring the other, the crocodiles waiting for zebras passing the river, animals fornicating, passing seeds on from flowers, etc., etc. This is where most things happen, not inside of the, let's say, the center of any specific biotop, but on the verge of it. So what if we treat the roof of Lieblinghaus as a verge, not a peak of a mountain, yes, not the middle of a street, but as a verge of different biotops? The institution, the local inhabitants, and actually when Sharon said that there's a 360 degrees view vista of Tel Aviv, it's not true, you were wrong. Actually, there's very good view of the inner life of people hiding themselves or being afraid that the things happening on the roof will be trespassing acoustically or whatever in their life, because they are the adjacent building. And this is a very good, I think it's fantastic opportunity to talk about common goals. Because either we say, let's not do anything because we will start a conflict, or we will say, let's find a way to involve people into our activities. So different people, the inhabitants, the people from the street, kids from the nearby school, seniors from a nearby senior activity center, etc., even tourists, whatever. And for this, we need tension, friction, right? Like the space of the border of the water, where all kind of animals of very different type want to drink. Some of them become allies. Some of them, for a second, are not killing each other. Some of them wait for the opportunity to jump to each other's throats. But this is a moment of certain interaction that is very diverse and wealthy. In this case, the pretext is not water, it's the shadow. So the installation will be basing on an idea of a pergola that was suggested in one of the sketches for the building that were never fulfilled as building design. So the pergola was never there. But because we know that the insatiable, aggressive sun in Tel Aviv is hitting on the roof, so in order to provide not only shadow for the surface of the roof, but also for potential activities on it, we need a pergola. How to make a pergola that will invite people to do things with it? So
Kuba, yes, I think the shade, the physical element we're all surrounding us with, like the river you gave as an example. But I would want to go back to maybe the philosophical aspect of where we find ourselves today in terms of what Yael mentioned as maybe the boundaries we're creating between public and private, between the intimacy that you describe in looking at roofs of people and into their flat and the open space. But I think the question is not only that, and when you talk about living house, it's also referring to what is the role of the public institution today, or the municipal institution today, in a political sense even. And I would want also Shira to answer, but also Yael to perhaps give us their ideas on what they think is the role of an institution that is municipal on one hand, but on the other hand is really striving to, to flourish their public space as a sort of a catalysator for good urban living, really. So it's like, I think it's a very relevant question today, as we also know that public institutions are changing a little bit. So maybe Yael, you can start, and maybe Shira can also answer.
You want to begin, Shira?
Shira?
Okay.
She's lost. Yes.
Okay. So I think that in a way, it's interesting looking at the things that Kuba show, that I was thinking, what are the difference between a roof and the ground floor? What will be the difference? And I don't know the answer, but I think that the question is very, very important in this case. Either it's in a way two way of thinking, two state of minds that can, or it is one thing that we can think it about it in the same way. I don't think I was thinking also from this talking with Kuba, is that I see the roof in a way as an alter ego of the building. And therefore I will ask about the relation between the building and the roof. Like I was all my life asking about the relation between the building, the structure, and the garden. And it was always the garden was the alter ego. It was there where all the it was, I don't, if the building or the space or the structure, the house was the irrational place, the garden was why I forgot the word, the chukka,
The passion.
the passion and
the guts, I would say as well, no? It's
so
like the testicles of the building that sort of expose themselves outside.
No, you know that it was the night, it was, you can feel the smell of the flower, you can feel the wind, fresh air, and something can happen in the night there that in a different way that it will happen in the house. Anyway, I can see the same relation that I'm very now interested in between the roof and the building. Because the roof is as also you said, also Sharon mentioned it in a way, it's also a viewpoint, and that's mean that we are seeing the things from above. We have distance from the thing in one end, but also we see into the neighborhood flat, and we see a lot of other kind of living that is like no, it's like a theater. I think that you feel you will feel dominate. You will feel that you are in a kind of a power, psychological power, that you are on the top. In another way, that you are into the river. So I think the idea of looking the river, the hackathon of the life through the river, that it's a beautiful metaphor, and thank you for that, Kuba. I will use it in other places too. And I see that the roof is doing the same, really. Okay, but I don't feel necessarily, as also I think if I understood Sharon mention it also, that the pergola will do it. Pergola will need it maybe for the shade. But I don't feel that the shade is the shade we need everywhere now, or not. It depends where. Maybe we need in other places, we need the sun. But here, I think that there is an architectural point of view, psychological point of view. The roof has its own code, no? That we have to understand it. And I think you begin to do it, Kuba, as you said, what you will, you intend to do there. And but I think that we can also use it. Liebling House can use it for really asking a bigger question about roof. Like, all this building is an example for a lot of things into the culture. So I will use again this opportunity of the Liebling roof to ask a larger, bigger, deeper question about it.
No, pergola is a pretext.
Yes, of course.
It's also the greenery that will be bringing the aspect of something that is garden-alike again, and something sensual. But you are completely right. In the beginning of our discussions with Shira and Sharon about the contemporary situation of Israel and Poland, and actually a situation that we might even bring to global level, we are dealing with a moment in which we have to reassess sometimes very basic codes of behavior related to simple everyday mechanics of dealing with the other, especially in divided societies. Yes. Finishing with such grand questions on how to reimagine pre-existing organizational formats, such as, sport organizations, religious organizations, democracy, so political organizations, party-based systems, binary approach to politics, etc., etc. So many things that, good or bad, were lasting for some time, and that we are now facing also with the pretext of COVID, that we were not even able to fathom, and still we are not able to fathom what will be the consequences in long-term scale. But when we started talking, it was what, December? Am I right?
Yes, even before, I think. Yeah, it was pre-COVID-19.
Yeah, so it was totally pre-COVID. We sensed it was coming. We knew there is something coming. Yeah, but now we clearly see we are in the moment of moving the page from one chapter to another, and you know, I think we receive on daily basis the proofs, the visible signs of the end of the world as we know it.
Yes, but what was very interesting for us as an institution is that the usage of space of the Lieblinghaus itself changed dramatically. Before it was filled with tourists from around the world coming to see exhibitions, and in the COVID space, we had a lot of people just sitting in the garden, sort of trespassing, but we didn't want them to feel trespassing, but they felt as if they were trespassing, and it was nice. We wanted to allow them to feel that, you know, they're doing something that is in the fringe between going into, you know, a public institution, but still it's their own because it's municipal, you know. And then we also even have photographs of people having sex on the roof, which is really unbelievable, but they use the space in a sort of very free way, which is very interesting. And you said something before that the car, for example, in Astana, is, you know, it represents liberty, no? But I think today we understand that, or maybe it's what I think is sometimes we need the community to have a sense of liberty in the sort of non-planning of a space. So how can you create a space that is, you know, planned on one hand, of course, because you need to, you know, get all the facilities and stuff, but still leave it in a way that community will feel the urge to create something of their own and not to get it like imposed on them?
It's a good question. I mean, this is what
But can I help you?
Yes, go on, go
on. We talk about it also. No, I think that today, you explained it described it very nice, Sharon. I feel very close to this way of thinking about that and what's happened then. And therefore I feel that, therefore thinking about private and public and erasing the border between them, it doesn't mean really to do it like saying everyone to everyone all the time, etc. But I think that it's we need to have another way of managing our spaces. And I'm calling it a little bit managing space in time and the time of the space. So then managing it, we can take a public space that is under regulation of a public space and turn it to a public space upon the time, okay, and the function we need it. And then we can also take private. And what we were doing it with our garden, the small patio of our office studio in Java, that in the COVID time till now, we turn it to a public space. And therefore we felt it came from the feeling of generosity to bring really the option to people to have more place. So it's not about now only public with the old definition and private with his old definition, but to think in another way and managing these spaces, private and public, in time and space and in space. So managing space and time can really bring new way of thinking the spaces, our public spaces.
Yes, and I think it's a nice way to put it, because it's always like the fringe of having multidisciplinary actions in the space. I mean, those meetings between sometimes something very vivid, like, you know, when you talk about urban planning today, you always want to talk about mixed use, you know, you want to do living together with working, and working together with leisure, and etc. So I think the interesting points are maybe really boundaries, but not only between public and private, but also between the actual actions that you do on site. So those fringes will frictions, even they create some sort of a dialogue or a meeting, or a new meeting point. It's just I just you know, thought about it because what you've said, but also Shira wanted to react on that. So are you
you're muted.
Muted?
Okay.
No, she's not.
So just about this, exactly what the exhibition is trying to make is around the questions about this scale of private, semi-private, shared and public spaces, and we have lots of them, not only on the roof, but between the buildings, and mainly in the center of Tel Aviv because of Gada's plan. And those areas are really, after the Corona time, we saw that we rediscovered these areas, and although not many roofs could be discovered, it raises the same questions. And after all, what is interesting is to think about the past. Those territories, parts, were given us to the community, to the society that lives in them, with a certain intentions to live in a way that they will use it as a community, as a garden, as a place to be, as a social phenomenon. And sometimes, because of the cultural aspects and the economical change and the potential to make a real estate from those parts, we lost the main idea of those places. And to rethink about the parts, like you suggest, it's really, I think it's really something that we have to make now in order to find more parts in our urban spaces. Well, we know that the roofs, the flat roofs, become very potential for building and for additional buildings. And regarding the conservation, sometimes we lost the main idea that those roofs becomes for the community and not for one use. So regarding those roofs are making lots of cultural, economic aspects, and that society is going through, and are one of the signs of the connection between common and public and the culture, and how democracy can be part of this citizenship of using those spaces. So I think the exhibition can really raise those questions by your pavilion. And that's all. I would like to thank for this evening and for the exhibition for Adam Mickiewicz Institute and Jacob and Yael. So thank you and happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Are we finishing? Are we finishing?
No, it's just been finished. I don't want to forget. That's all.
Yeah,
but there is another qualification of space also that I like very much, which is social space. This is where, because it's a term that is, you know, movalis, it's big enough that can mean many things that are about socializing. And it makes me think, I don't know if you heard about the Johannesburg Lab, a project done by Goethe Institute in Johannesburg, when Katharina von Rückenstahl was the director, and her first gesture, her being from Berlin actually, was to, when she arrived to be the director, she took a hammer and she destroyed, made the hole actually in the wall surrounding Goethe Institute in Johannesburg, leading to the garden precisely, right? Which was a funny gesture in itself, but also she like clearly stated that she is doing it on purpose to invite people to ask themselves what are the boundaries of them influencing reality, on what terms they can do it, because it was not the culture and economy of division anymore. So they had to reestablish new codes. I think, of course, it's not the post-apartheid South Africa, but we are more or less in a situation in which we see that the status quo is gone. We need new ideas, and we don't want them and new deals, and we don't want them to be effects of oppression or vicious, aggressive moves. But still, there will be, like you were mentioning, Sharon, sex on the roof. There has to be some trespassing, in a way, because it's like with parkour, you know, the people do incredible, very creative gymnastic moves on things that were not meant to be used as such. Yeah. And having sex on the roof is fantastic with a view. Hello.
Yael, you're on mute.
Again. And therefore, I think that thinking about the roof as an or kind of alternative or an alter ego, it's helping very much. It's giving us some more freedom again to think about it, not in the old way, I think. Yes.
Imagine the door that is only half closed or half open into the institution, and imagine that even in the most COVID-related paranoia, you create some mechanism that enables people to, like, you know, in secret go up to the roof, as I did as a teenager. You know, I did all this trespassing as a teenager. It was fantastic. I wasn't smoking marijuana, but like doing these things, well, in itself, the experience, and also what you, Yael, said, related to the elevation. Yeah, I mean, there is on one hand the feeling of sudden control over reality. This is what you have with skyscrapers and corner offices for upper management in American corporations, but it's also the feeling that you get on top of your everydayness, of your own reality, and you can have a look at your own reality from above. Yeah? So why not thinking, you know, maybe there's a bit of a privilege in it, the privilege of experiencing something, but a privilege that can be earned in a way by the fact that you dared to trespass.
It's a self-reflection, you say.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it, because I like the idea that on one hand it's public, but it's not, like Yael said, on the street level. It's above, so you have to like enter through something in order to go to the top, and then be in a, you know, open space, but it's still somehow a private. So I think this motion of going through a building and coming up to the roof needs to also reflect something, you know. Like it's also interesting because, you know, you can see that today in Corona times, you just go on the boulevards of the streets of Tel Aviv, like everybody's just taking out their blankets and sitting with their laptops. it's really nice to see how people reclaim back their city. But how do you really invite people to enter into a place that it's not their own and claim it as well? I think it's something that we still need to
maybe it's a question we should ask to our public tonight.
Yes.
People, would you like to use this roof?
People, would you like to?
Following the process that we had on the roof, on the public roof here, we made, I saw that the users, we didn't open it formally, officially. We just left the roof as it is and people used it. And during the time we add, every day we add another sign, what to do and what not to do. And people just use the roof, and the relations between us and them become more important than the space itself, because they left us things and we told them what they can do and how to use the light and how they need to close the gate, and every time they left something, sometimes a t-shirt, sometimes a book, and sometimes, so it became like a relation between us without any connection to the official status of the roof. So now we are trying to think again about the roof as a public space, because it is a public space, but it's not official public space. So it's raising lots of questions and very interesting questions. So I hope.
Well, you know, but maybe the fact that it's not official is also interesting because it's providing informality. So it's also giving the possibility for trespassing.
Yeah.
You know, for people gladly bending some boundary. But you know,
it's raising.
Just to finish,
Sorry.
Something that is against, let's say, the architects. But one of my problems as architect, doing also artistic or para-artistic installations, is that I realize that architecture itself is in a way secondary. So what we are aiming to create is an environment for fulfillment, for agency, for happiness, and we can do it sometimes with very unformalized means, with things that are not subtle at all, that have nothing to do with sublimation of grand architecture as we praise it between architects as something we give prizes to each other for, etc., etc. So, like, you know, it's like the sofa in my mother-in-law's house where I moved from COVID. So in March, my girlfriend, our two kids, and I, we moved to a house in the countryside with a big pluses, a big garden, the river nearby, the forest, and the house. I'm telling you, it's definitely not my taste. It's a plastic reference to some ambition of creating an alpine chalet with low budget, let's put it straight. But it has all kind of other objects of what are the middle class, let's say, points of pride. And one of them are the sofa and the armchairs made out of leather that I hate deeply. And they're horrible. I mean, like, my eyes are weeping. But what happens is that it's so alleviating to lie down on these and not to think even for a second about what is my everyday sort of automatism. Is like, I would put this here and this there, and like I would design this space with these or that means. No, we are just feeling very comfy. You know, it's like the shamelessness of wearing cotton sweatshirts that are, you know, too baggy at home. This sort of a thing. It's also about, you know, moving certain formal code from the family or privacy related background, which is again a form of trespassing.
We have a question or a few questions here from the audience. One is from somebody called Alon Spitzer. He's saying, a good question that is being discussed lately is the relation between the private areas of, for example, the new light rail station in Tel Aviv metropolitan area, especially outside of Tel Aviv, kindergartens, schools, facilities, and other municipal facilities, and making them accessible to the public. I would love to hear your ideas on that. Also, an example for private use of public space, and he put another idea. So, yeah, I think we raised that question in regarding to Lieblinghaus, but it might be also interesting to ask generally about the idea of private and public when it comes to municipal buildings, and how they're used, or what is giving to the public. Somebody want to answer that?
I will maybe just very fast, because I don't know the Tel Aviv situation so well. So Yael is a much more in place a person to answer this. But I'm thinking that there, on general basis, that what I expect from the municipality or municipal forces is to be close to inhabitants, regardless of political background, providing them this environment for happiness in or good everyday functioning, also by responding in a more swift and tender way, or sympathizing way, to what are sometimes informal needs. And in the town or village, actually, where I moved for COVID period, the lady who's the head of the village, she decided to make a semi-formal public space by, they were cutting some old, but like too old trees that were about to fall, and so the pieces of trunks, she decided to lie down by the what was once the railway station, apropos. And because the government has, and it was the government of the national level, has forbidden the use during COVID lockdown of kindergarten, but also official playgrounds. The playgrounds were closed. So she decided to make an unofficial public space for kids to use. And none of it were things that you could directly call the playground infrastructure. It was basically pieces of trunks put together in a haphazard way, but it was a very conscious decision. She was giving a playground to kids that you could not name a playground. So they could jump, they could do things. How far in it is dangerous, or how much of it is against sanitary, also illusion-driven decisions, I don't know, but I liked it a lot as a gesture.
Yeah, unfortunately in Tel Aviv we don't have so much,
trees to cut.
trees to cut, or empty spaces to just, make a kindergarten or a playground or whatever. But I think this is a very, very relevant question. Like, how much can a municipality or even an engineering department like we are part of make spaces that are available to the public without doing, like, something very repetitive, like you see here in playgrounds, because you have to, tick all the boxes of it being secure enough for the children. So you get like something that is it ticked all the boxes in terms of providing a safe place for children, but there is no saying it anymore, because it's so mundane in a way. So the question, I think, is very relevant for our public spaces today, also as a municipality, because nowadays, I'm just giving this example of our beautiful beaches across the country, you, for example, in Tel Aviv, that is quite a small sort of strip of land, you see playground for children, and then a gym for adults, and then David Ben-Gurion standing on his head, and banks, and a huge chair, and We Love Tel Aviv signs, and trying to bring palm trees. And so, you know, we're planning and planning and planning and planning and planning, but I think
over-designing.
And over-designing. And our conversation right now talks about the need of the public to do their own, to feel that they're trespassing, to feel that they're creating something that is, you know, not superimposed from above. So I think this is a very, very relevant question that deals also with our, you know, the generation that maybe not us anymore, but perhaps the generation that is, you know, sort of the artistic, or I don't know how to call them, the generation that we aspire to still give place to in the city, and not only, as we say, or rich, as Sarah said, not only the rich that can live in the city, but also, you know, the sort of milieu that is doing artistic thinking and free spirit in a way, and keeping the city alive. So this is a very relevant question, I think.
I remember as a young architect, I was astonished about the program from the city talking, for example, on a plan along the seashore, looking for attractions. And I didn't understand why we need any attractions along the sea or the beach if we have this sunrise or sunset in another place, etc. Because I really, it was, I know it seems a little bit naive, but I didn't understand why they are talking all the time about this attraction, and therefore what you describe now, that we have this and this and this, all these over-designed places along the sea, it's what really happened. And I think that the beginning of an answer will be the managing of time and place. And Tel Aviv municipality is doing a little bit about it now, when she, for example, taking some of the street and turn them to, they are calling it, I think, tactic streets, that they are opening and closing it when it's necessary, or when they want to use it. So a street can be for during the day for cars and of course, and what we need to do for services, etc. And then in the evening can be also a beautiful piazza when we don't have the car, when we stop the car moving there. And we know it from the world that there is all these places that are shared spaces, that you can do everything in the same places. And it's very interesting because, you know, it's not only about architecture, really, or about getting prices for a beautiful design, but you have also to manage also the community has to think about not herself, but also about the other, how to, you know, it's because you have to take the responsibility for this place. So if you have also the car together with the children, you don't have to be afraid about it, but you have to act in a regional way, in a right way, that you can live together in this shared space. So I think
that's the beauty of, I think, a city, these shared spaces. That's what we talked about before, like, you know, designing a city that has multiple function is much more interesting than having segregated places.
In many ways, these functions can even collide.
Collide. That's interesting, yes.
But can I drop something? It's also, you all know these two projects, but they are very antinomic, even though they are parallel. The first is a Minhocão project in Sao Paulo. That was a prototype for for the project in New York. What was the name of Jesus?
The High Line.
The High Line, thank you. So the Minhocao that was started by a bunch of activists, including an architect, Marcio Kogan, as an idea that, you know, the passage, the street passing above another street was totally out of place. It was just showing muscles during dictatorship by some minister of infrastructure. And so they managed to, the group of activists managed to convince the municipality to close some 5 kilometers, if I remember, of this car passage above the ground. So it was on the level of second or even third floor, also really polluting the apartments on this level, to close it during weekends and leave it to people to use it. And then the artists that were behind the idea of High Line, they were strongly influenced by this idea. But what happened with the High Line is a negative example, because the High Line became beautifully over-designed by Diller and Scofidio, becoming a most fantastic urban attraction in New York, the winner. It's winning with everything. It has a huge traffic of tourists. But what happened was the gentrification effects in the surroundings that paradoxically kicked out the artists who started High Line from their studios and apartments, because they were renting them, and they were not able to rent it anymore because the prices went up so high that the entire neighborhood became a generic place for middle class and upper middle class and yuppies, instead of being a place for different interesting communities. So the over designing, but also the process of over controlling the space. And I think design is about control. So every time a municipal person wants to design something, let's design this, let's add this and design this, it means I want to have control on this. So when a year or two after the High Line was opened, I've met Marcio Kogan in Sao Paulo, and we were speaking, and Marcio said, like, let's not do anything with Minhocao. We can even, if we manage to have it open for public all week long, let's leave it as an interpretation space. Let's not design it in any way. And this is, I think, the most sensible way one can do there. Because one of the problems we also have is that we create different formats of usage of reality in which we fit ourselves and the others, and we don't leave any space for people for, you know,
their own creation,
their own creativity.
Yes, it was the role of the architect all the time, no? To manipulate the others.
Yeah. Engendering the society.
A long time ago.
Yes. Okay. So unfortunately, we're out of time already, but it was a wonderful conversation. And thank you very much, both Yael, Jacob, and also Shira, for being with us today. We are going to have a few more conversations about the Republic exhibition that we're doing, and I'm welcoming everybody that is here to take part in it. Also, next week, yes.
It's good to say that this exhibition is set to open next week on Thursday.
I said it, but you can please give us more details.
And okay. So
what is the time and what are the regulations? Can everybody come in already? Shira.
The regulations are fine, but you have to come. You are invited one by one. Just come. We're supposed to be open, and I hope everything will be fine. That's all. It will be from 6, the opening, but it's not
Thursday.
Just
yes. So as we started, welcome to the Republic. We have a lot of interesting projects in our center from next Thursday on. and Jacob and the roof will be later on in spring when you can really use the roof with other activities. But as for next week, we have also very interesting guests because we are screening a movie together with the Epos Film Festival, and it's called Who Owns the City? It's a city about Berlin, and a very interesting history that is enshrined and embedded in the public spaces there in Berlin. And we're going to have a conversation with the filmmaker and with Professor Philipp Oswald. Philipp Oswald, he was the head actually of the Bauhaus Foundation before, but very involved in Berlin issues and also informed in what is going on in Tel Aviv. So we're going to compare a little bit Tel Aviv and Berlin and what's happening nowadays. So thank you everybody again for joining us, and thank you all our wonderful guests for speaking and having so many interesting insights. And I hope to keep in touch with both Yael, and Jacob very, very soon. And see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.